In this slideshow, I will cover what is a theory. A theory describes a relationship between two things. For example, the theory of gravity describes a relationship between the motion of two objects. This relationship can be causal. For example, theories in physics suggest that the motion of one object can cause motion in another. Or the relationship may have an intermediary factor that might influence both of them. So, for example, you might propose a theory that the number of foreclosures on homes is related to the number of divorces, with the causal factor being some measure of tough financial times. One of the most important things to consider when devising a theory is its validity. That is, whether other people would believe that the theory is valid or makes sense. There are many kinds of validity, but one of the most fundamental kinds is called face validity. That is, whether there is a convincing argument that the theory is true that would convince a casual observer. You can come up with an infinite number of theories that don't have face validity. For example, you might theorize that the average annual rainfall in the Amazon is related to the annual crime rate in New York City. If you can't come up with a convincing argument that this is true, your theory lacks face validity. As an aspiring researcher, you need to think carefully about any theories you might propose and how you can make your theories more valid. To do this, you need to understand more deeply what a theory is, how you go about devising one, and how you can test it. In this course, you will become acquainted with two different kinds of theories: the informal everyday theories that people use in their day-to-day activities and interactions with one another, and the formal positivist theories of organizational researchers. Informal theories are the kind that people use every day. In fact, it's impossible to act effectively without having theories of how things work. These are called theories in use, or theories of action. A simple example of such a theory is that flipping a switch on the wall will turn a light on. But for this course, you'll be looking at theories that are more involved with personal actions and their effects on others, such as people's theories of how to get other people to do things. The formal, scientific approach to developing theories involves paying close attention to describing the various parts of a theory and how these parts relate to one another, as well as how the theory can be tested. As you grow as a scholar, you will gain the ability to develop good, rigorous theories that meet many measures of validity. I'm going to just briefly describe informal theories and then delve a bit more deeply into formal theorizing. Informal theories in use are what people use when they want to get something done. So, for example, some people try to get subordinates to work harder by creating fear, while others may micromanage their subordinates to get them to work harder. And still others might just be friendly to try to achieve the same result. People generally do very little testing of their own theories in use. During this course, you will begin to build your own ability to uncover and test your theories in use, and to help others do so. Now, we're going to focus on the formal positivist approach to the components of theory building, and theory testing. This is the essence of research, and building a strong basic understanding in this area will help you in the next few years. A theory describes a relationship between two things, such as the relationship between job satisfaction and high worker productivity. In formal theory building, these two things are called constructs. They are high-level descriptions of characteristics, phenomena, or attributes that are of interest to the researcher and his or her community of scholars. As such, they're approximated units from the real world which cannot be measured by themselves. To test whether a theory is true, you need to be able to have some measure of a construct. Measures in a theory are called variables and are defined by operational definitions. Operational definitions are some type of pre-specified measures that are very clearly defined so that you and other scholars can evaluate the construct in a way that is meaningful and valid. Variables are related to each other through hypotheses, and constructs are related to each other through propositions. So, for example, some scholars are interested in the effects of trust in the workplace. To do this, they need first to define what they mean by trust, measure the extent to which it exists in the workplace. Scholars have come up with many measures of trust using various operational definitions. For example, John Butler created variables that he called conditions for trust, which describe the parts of an overall measure of trust. Operational definitions of these variables involve the responses to a set of questions that ask participants about their perceptions of others. He grouped these questions into sets that ask about particular areas like integrity, ability, and consistency. The specific questions that make up the conditions of trust survey are the operational definitions that he uses to measure the variables that comprise an overall level of trust. These variables are linked by hypotheses to expected outcomes. A formal theory is a system of constructs and variables. Constructs are linked by propositions, and variables are linked by hypotheses. It's important to understand what the goal of a theory is. It's to investigate questions of how, when, and why. It is not a description, which is what. Defining categories, fitting data into sets based on their characteristics, is not a theory. Developing typologies, such as personality types, for example, is not a theory. Designing metaphors, such as lighting human dynamics to the flow of energy, is not a theory. A theory describes relationships and answers questions about how, when, and why. One condition of validity for a theory is that the operational definitions are believable measures of the variables, and that the variables are believable aspects of the construct. Just as with the believability of the relationship between two constructs, others should be able to believe that the measures you've chosen are a valid way to evaluate the variables that make up the construct, and that the hypotheses reflect the proposition. And finally, it's important to remember that a formal theory is bounded by values, time, and space. One must specify the conditions under which a theory is expected to apply. So, what we've done so far is covered what is a theory, causal theories, informal versus formal theories, the components of a theory, what a theory is not, and the boundedness of theories. We'll be talking later about some measures that can be used to evaluate theories.